Hi guys, I'm Andy Walsh, and I just wanted to walk you through some of the steps that I took to make my most recent painting and project, which was the fungal sort of temple piece. And so I'm just going to open up the file and to also talk a little bit about my process in Medium and what it can be used for, what it's not so good for. So this is the sculpt, and as you can see, like in the image, there was like a guy kind of like here or something, and we're looking from behind, looking into this kind of doorway. And I was actually really surprised that like when I started, I didn't expect what was like what the finished product was came out like. Because when you're in Medium, you can only get like a rough idea. As I'm looking at it now, I can't really see camera angles as such because of the sort of perspective that I'm looking at. So you sort of have to take a bit of a leap of faith when you go from the sculpt into the 3D program, where you can actually see the actual boundaries of the the frame, and then you can compose the shot a little bit better. So it's a little bit of I guess sort of shooting in the dark and a bit of luck, but I also wanted to show you how I started this piece. So I'm just a bit rusty, so I hope this is going to work. Yeah, okay, so this was the first thing that I sculpted, and it's been moved with the move tool, but full disclosure, I didn't necessarily think that the piece that ended up coming out, that was what I was going for. I just made this, and I kind of thought it looked like some sort of alien like skull, or like some sort of amphibious weird skull, or like a weird like helmet or something organic anyway. So I did it, and then I thought, well, I don't quite know what to do next, so I'll start a new layer, and I started to just sculpt on top of it, and I ended up with this. So it's kind of random. So I guess I must have started here and then just started to think about a path leading up to a doorway, and that was kind of the only kind of hint that I was getting at the time. And then I started to sculpt around the doorway, and then sculpt all these kind of things and make it more like an organic, bony, weird kind of temple. And that sort of brings me to my main point about Oculus, which is that it's Oculus Medium. One of the cons is that it does feel a little bit like you're sculpting with shaving foam, like that, and it's very soft and it's not very precise. So one of the great, if you wanted to do a weird bony temple, there's no other software that can touch it, and it's really intuitive. As I'm sure if you've seen any other tutorials on Medium, it's just so intuitive to just like, especially with the mirror tool, to create something that looks, believable. And so, you can create something like this, and all of a sudden we've got like a little archway. And then, of course, you've got the power of the brushes. So if I use I quite like the stone ones. What do they end up? Rocks, stuff like this, and you can stamp them or something like that, and it looks great. And I'm also going to talk about my export process, because nobody seems to be talking too much about that, and I think it's important. And hopefully I'll go over the rendering process as well. So yeah, so this is what I ended up with, and like I say, it's great for those kind of organic sort of things, rocks, landscapes, things like that is really great for. It's just when you need some precision, it's just not there yet. I think it needs some extra tools, and the system that they have of resolution is a little tricky, because you like in ZBrush, you'll do a sculpt, and I think the resolution on this layer is okay, but let's say if you were working on something and the resolution wasn't great, and you think, well, I'll just up the resolution, and then it does a weird thing where it shrinks the layer size down by 50%. So like with this one, I can zoom way in, but if I increase the resolution to a degree that it was really nice and tight, you wouldn't be able to zoom in too much. And I don't quite understand that. It might be just me being stupid, but that's one of the downsides. You can't really get in there precisely, and like if you wanted to say like make a castle, and you wanted the castle to have really distinct sides, edges, features, I don't see it working in medium quite yet. But if you need something that's loose that you can then paint over, that's a different subject, and that's what I did with this. So yeah, so I think I'll just go over the exporting, and then we'll call it a day, and I'll see if I can talk about the importing and rendering process later. So when exporting, it's got the density of these meshes. It's going to be pretty high, and also if you sort of decimate it too much, I mean, you look at all these tiny, you better hope that you don't need these details, because they could just get broken in the export because of if you wanted to decimate down. So let's see if I can go to the export menu. So export, and it's going to show you how many triangles it is, which is like you have to do. I wish it had a comma here. 2,000. It's 2,970,200. So it's like 3 million triangles, which is going to be probably too high. I mean, if you've got like a decent system and you don't care about how many polys it is, then maybe. But most of the time, you're going to want to drop it down to, I don't know, something like 25%, something like that. So now we're down to 1 million. So even a million is quite high, but I will just take that risk unless you know that you're going to be putting in tons of more geometry into the scene. I'd keep it, try and keep some of the original details, or it just will in the program. It will in the software. You'll just see as I zoom in, you can just see that it just looks blobby. Like here, it just looks pretty bad. Now, if you take this detail and drop it down to a third of what it is, it's going to look pretty bad. And I did end up, when I imported it, I think I dropped this one down to about a third, and when I imported it, I put on a turbo smooth in 3D Studio Max, or I don't know if I did one in, because I ended up rendering this in Cinema 4D. I tried to experiment around, but maybe put a smoother on it, but it will, at like 500,000 to 1 million polys, putting a turbo smooth on it's going to be very tricky. So yeah, that's one of the other downsides, is just trying to get it from here into 3D and maintaining performance, maintaining resolution. Okay, so I think with that I'll call it a day and head on over to the import process. Okay, and here we are inside 3D Studio Max, and I just want to show you my workflow and why I didn't end up going with 3D Studio Max at the end, and I went with Cinema 4D instead, mainly because of the speed of the renderer, because I was using V-Ray. I mean, I guess it's less of a 3D Studio Max and Cinema 4D issue than it is a render and engine issue. But I have the file here in 3D Studio Max just to show you. Really, it's actually, I think, easier to show you what the mesh looks like in 3D Studio Max than in Cinema 4D because of the viewport shading. If I just go to shaded, and then you can see the quality, it's a little bit bumpy. And I'll put on wireframes so you can see it's all in triangles. And it doesn't look great, but it did benefit. I put a turbo smooth on here. If I just show that, it just helps a little bit. And in fact, for the render iterations, I put 2 on, because you kind of get that for free when you're rendering. So I think so anyway. So like the render, if I was to put that up to 2 in the viewport, it would die. In fact, you don't even need it on in the viewport, really. It just helps a little bit. So, and there's this little spaceman that I downloaded. I can't remember where I downloaded that from, but I found it online somewhere. And so here we are. And then what I'm going to do is show you the render. So this is the camera viewport now. And if I show you how the V-Ray render works, this is the real-time V-Ray RT, and it's got there is some fog in here, and I really wanted to use fog to give it some atmosphere. And so here it is, and this is just to give you an idea of the sort of speed. This is working off my CPU now, not my GPU. And you can see there that it's very noisy and it's pretty slow. And if I were to change my camera angle like this, you know, it's not like sort of full stop, but I mean it is taking a while to get rid of some of that noise, which means that while you're working, it's just not gonna be good enough to be, if you really want to get some good sort of camera angles and you want to fly through and just sort of check it out from this side. And yeah, so it wasn't ideal. It was just a little bit too slow for me. So I'm going to stop that there and then go into Cinema 4D and show you how RedShift works. So here we are in Cinema 4D, and this is actively running now. This is RedShift running, and there's volumetric fog in here. I just want to show you the difference in speed. So if I move around, I'm a little rusty with Cinema 4D. I've got to select. There we go. I've got to select something to orbit around. So as you can see, now RedShift is running off my GPU. And I have a GTX 1070, and it's just quite a lot faster, and the volumetrics are quite thick. The way that RedShift uses volumetrics, they just feel a lot more thick than in V-Ray. And there is there is one big sort of light here, this big area light, and that is attached to the main fog, and that's giving me the bulk of the volumetrics coming through here, which is the yellow. Sorry, it's really tricky to orbit around or something. There we go. And so in terms of like trying to get like a composition, this is just ideal. We can just move around this, and within a few seconds we've got like a very good idea as to what we want. And like the way that it's sort of experimental, like I say, when I was in Medium I didn't know quite what I was going to get, and then when you come into here, you're seeing that these like spiky things are creating these really nice silhouettes. And in addition, I have a light either side, so here, and they are strong yellow lights. At first I didn't put those in, and I was fairly happy with the results, and I thought, I need some more silhouetting to be happening, so I placed some lights down there, and then you'll suddenly get this nice silhouette here. So yeah, Cinema 4D with RedShift was my chosen renderer, and it gave me some really nice results. So what I'm going to do now is stop that and show you the Photoshop part of the production. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. I'm going to just take off all of the extra layers, and this is like the raw render, and then go through some of the layers that I added. So there's just a few little paint overs here just to get rid of some of the noise and just put in a little bit of detail. Nothing too major, some photo textures there.
some more paint work. In the foreground there's like various bits of paint and photo texture. The dodge was really handy here because it's quite dull, and whenever I do complete a render, I'm never expecting it to be anything more than about, I don't know, 50 to 60% of the way there, and Photoshop is going to take care of the rest. So we have dodge layers here, more smoke, and then I have to then start working on the composition and making sure that that's working. So there's elements here. I don't know which came first, but like once I put one of those in, I realized that something needed to be on the opposite side to balance. So it was maybe if I put that in, I thought there was something lacking here. So now that these are balancing. And then some foreground elements of like this blue kind of fungus. Some foreground mist. And some dodges on here. And these really help walk us up to the focal area. And then I always have like a folder with my main color corrections on and my effects, so that I can switch them all on and all off in one go. And then here is the second shot. Again, taking up all these layers. You can see there's quite a lot of difference between the raw render. It still doesn't give us everything. We then have to go in and really work it up. And just adding like a little jetpack for the guy. Not jetpack, but you know, like a sort of ventilation system. I'm not sure if that layer was left on, but it just gives the impression of like gas venting from his mask. And then just some more paint, and say like because this is a similar shot to the last one, I'm having to just try and recreate some of the same elements. So these fungus are put back in, painting over some of this to get rid of the 3D look. Some more dodges on these little, I don't even know what they are, some weird green fungus. And atmosphere and foreground mist is really essential, and this kind of painting really gives it atmosphere and gives it life. And then the same foreground fungus. And then of course the color correction, which makes a huge difference here. Really have to increase the contrast, because it's starting to like lose it here, starting to become a bit amorphous. Okay, so that's pretty much my process. We've gone from Oculus Medium, tried out 3D Studio Max, tried V-Ray, gone into Cinema 4D, rendered it out there. Again, like if I was to get anything of this kind of quality with the volumetrics in V-Ray, it would have taken 20 hours or something like that on my system. But I got this result at around 3,000 pixels, 3,500 pixels in about an hour. And that's pretty staggering, that's pretty significant. And it also is faster than Octane for volumetrics, I have found, and I think a few other people have mentioned that online, that it's a lot faster than Octane when you're using volumetrics. Otherwise, I'm sure they're comparable, but yeah, it's if you're going to do a foggy scene, then it just can't be beat right now. Like, I don't know anything else how that it works as fast. So yeah. I hope you got something out of these tutorials. Well, it's not really a tutorial, but like this walkthrough. And hit me up with any questions, and I'll see what I can do. And yeah, hope to see you again. Thanks.